Welcome to another episode of the Unbound Book Babes. This week, we're going to be talking about the true cost of reading for free from your library. So, I was on vacation, which is why we didn't have a couple posts, and I was out of town. We are back now, but while I was out of town, I came across an article talking about how much it actually costs your local libraries to hold digital copies of books and audiobooks. And Kristen, I sent you this link while I was gone. Just before we dig into the nitty gritty of it, what was your initial reaction to what that first article was saying?
Already completely forgot. Do you have another link to that article? Because I'm guessing I read the headline and was like, oh, interesting.
That's probably how it went.
Give me a quick summary again. It's just more expensive to own or for the library to get ebooks, right?
Yeah.
And audio books.
Yeah. And so not only is it more expensive for them to buy digital copies, something else that happens is they have to keep a pretty extensive list that they have to keep monitoring for when those books or those, we'll call them leases, because that's more of what this is. They're leasing this digital copy, and then we as a consumer are borrowing off of that lease to read it and then send it back. So what ends up happening is they have to keep a really extensive list of all of their digital copies and then check on when they're expiring and then make a decision of if that item is, one, popular enough, two, they can afford to start the lease over after the lease is finished.
And authors don't make, I don't know how it works for authors in America. Because I think my knowledge is from Australia, oddly enough, is where the article. But like some authors get money per borrow of a hard copy. So, or like say per 5 borrows, they get some sort of stipend or something. But for ebooks and audiobooks, they don't get anything from a library.
So they don't get anything from the library, but because their publishers are usually, and we can talk about indie authors in a second, but publishers are usually selling these leases to the libraries. Do you think that they're getting a cut of that? The cost to the library for the lease? The publisher
The
pay?
authors?
Correct.
I would imagine the publisher is, but for ebooks and stuff, I read that authors don't get anything, or it's like pennies on the book or something, so that it's more beneficial to go borrow the physical book to support an author because they don't get anything for an ebook.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to dive into that too because I didn't come across that in this particular chain of research.
Yeah. There's a lot, and I feel like there's a lot that we may never know or have accurate information on because one, I think a lot of contracts are so author and publisher specific. And two, I don't know how transparent these companies are about their contracts with their authors. And neither of us have published a book in a library yet.
Yeah. So I found a pretty good article on this blog, I'm going to call it, about ebooks and licensing and what the authors get paid. So I will link this article in our show notes. So let's talk about what it truly costs your library to have these digital copies on hand for us. To license an ebook, it can cost an exorbitant amount for libraries. And these costs are often double to triple the cost of a physical copy. But these digital versions, both audiobooks and ebooks, have expiration dates, and sometimes they're anywhere, you're leasing them anywhere from 1 year to 2 years. There's different types of contracts through different companies. And sometimes there's also a borrow limit. So it could be anywhere from a couple dozen borrows to, 50 borrows per book. And all of that is decided upon with the publisher and the leasing company. That lease will expire either when the year is up or when the amount of borrows is up. So if there's like a super popular title and that lease only includes, let's say, 26 borrows, once those 26 borrows are done, that branch of library has to purchase another lease on that title.
Wow. I mean, so we truly never really own digital copies of anything.
Nope.
Like, that's insane.
It is insane. And so I know recently, because we all know I'm a big fan of Hoopla, recently their app has changed a lot. You have different types of borrows, and we have a whole episode on different apps to read. So I'll link that in the eye at the top, because I go into way more detail about Hoopla's new different types of borrows in that episode. And we also cover Libby, who's owned by Overdrive, who's probably the number one company that everyone knows when it comes to library app borrowing. So this has made me so much more aware of not just using Hoopla, but actually going into my physical library and getting a book off the shelf and reading it. And honestly, that speaks to me a lot more lately because I am loving physical books right now. It's kind of crazy because when I think about how Hoopla has changed, now knowing what I know about leasing these books, their changes make so much more sense. So they changed from having instant borrows and flex borrows. So right now, when there's an instant borrow, the libraries have subscriptions that they pay monthly. So the library is paying Hoopla a monthly subscription, and the amount per day is decided by the days in that month. So let's say they pay $100 and there's 30 days in that month. That $100 is divided by that 30 days for their daily allowable borrow in cost. Not in number of books, not in number of audio, not in number of anything like that. It does go back to a dollar amount. Now, each ebook and audiobook can cost something different. So when I get that little flag when I go to borrow a book, it will tell me the daily allotted borrow for your library has been reached. What that means is that for their daily cost, they have now met or exceeded that, and I have to wait until the day renews to borrow something else. So that makes way more sense to me now. Because I was like, why am I getting this? What is the true reason behind this? Well, now I know.
Money.
Money. Shocked.
Always money.
Who's shocked? Not me. So they also have flex borrows. The flex borrows are not subject to the daily limit because they are purchased separately through the subscription. So when you get a flex borrow, they'll end up paying some other amount for that flex borrow. And as a user, I can only have 3 flex books borrowed at one time. So it helps limit the number of copies checked out. It also helps limit the cost to the library. And these flex borrows now can have a hold or a wait list.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was reading this, I had some questions because what about disabled persons who can't physically go into the library, blind people who rely on audio because not every, the amount of books that are out there in the world and then the ones that are actually translated to Braille is probably shameful, honestly. So they rely on audio. So us being able to use digital is super important for accessibility reasons, right? And I know, like, for example, we had one commenter on a previous video say, like, in their country, they were from Croatia, they don't have as many physical books available to them because they're just not coming to that country, but they get these books through digital copies by buying them elsewhere and sending them to their e-reader. So there's, these, when we talk about, I don't, like when we talk about what's happening in the world with like defunding of public resources, and libraries are often on the chopping block, and there's a lot of political just shit around them.
Mm-hmm.
Being defunded is going to be affecting the library's ability to hold digital copies of things. So there's less accessibility for people who actually need it. And then also just, they have to choose, like that's putting librarians and board members in a pretty tough spot. Because, for example, there is an example from the New York Public Library this happens to be Barack Obama's book is the example they give. I'm going to link this below, but it says the New York Public Library for Barack Obama's A Promised Land from Penguin Random House. The library system bought 639 1- and 2-year leases for the ebook, paying a total of $22,512. That is wild. That
seems like a misuse of funds to spend that much on ebooks. Like, I mean, okay, at some point, right, the libraries have to be losing money on these transactions.
You would think. Like,
so at some point, they just don't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, do the public donors, do the people that donate to libraries get a say on, like, oh, okay, guys, that's an insane amount to spend on ebooks? Like,
I don't know, because you have Go ahead.
A lot of library funding is actually like private donors.
Yeah.
And they actually don't get a lot from the local government.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine private donors don't really have a say unless they donated like 90% up for that year or whatever. But
right.
I mean, at some point, if that's one book, right? That's one ebook that they spent $22,000 on. There's no way. Well, how many copies did they buy? 60?
600.
600.
600.
See, the majority
something
of other copies throughout the libraries. Most libraries have like 1 or 2 copies of most books, right?
Right.
Why would they buy 600 of those?
Because they assumed it would be really popular. So let's do some math. So.
And that's one library?
One library
bought 600 copies?
Digital copies, yeah. So that's $35.23 per copy if it was borrowed one time. Now, this is 1 to 2 years. So let's say, each copy of the 639 copies, let's say each of those was checked out 3 times. That's a total of 1,917 reads of that book, like borrows of that book.
I just don't get it. Libraries don't even have 600 copies of an SJM book.
Yeah, so
even most libraries just have like 20 copies. I don't get why they bought 600 copies.
The New York Public Library system, you have to think about how large that library system is. It's not one physical library, it's the public library system for New York. So this could be many different branches across all the different boroughs across all of New York.
That makes more sense. I was like, one library? I couldn't wrap my head around that.
No.
All of New York. All of New York bought 600 copies?
Yeah, so they bought 639 copies, and then if 3 people borrowed, each of those copies, they'd have 1,900 or 1,917. That divided by the total amount that they leased it for, the $22,512, would mean that it cost $11.74 per borrow for the library. And the hardcover retail for $45. So, but you can often find it for cheaper in other places, which libraries traditionally, their physical copies they buy from a bookstore, or they get donated, or they'll buy it secondhand. Like, so their range of how they get their physical books is also very different too. But some public libraries are using taxpayers' money, right? And so,
well, they do, but it's not the majority of their funding for the year.
no.
Most of it comes from, it's based on how many card holders they have, determines their funding that they get from the city.
Right. But I just think it's kind of funny because, like, you brought up the whole point of, like, do donors get to choose? Well, taxpayers don't get to choose. Like, we don't get to choose how our money is allotted. I would prefer all of my taxes to go to a library, not everywhere else, right? And so, like, but I'm also not getting a choice in the amount that goes to my public library system of that's being used for. I just trust that the system is working. But I think it's kind of funny because we know how little authors make, whether they're independently publishing or traditionally publishing. Like we have a whole, episode on how much traditional authors make in publishing. And so it's kind of crazy because in this chart from the same article that talks about the New York Public Library, they're talking about library ebook licenses. List price is around $55. The publisher gets 75% of that, so $38.50. And then the author gets 25%, so around $9.60.
I mean, okay, it sounds pretty skewed, right? It sounds pretty bad. But the publishing company should be paying for all of the materials to make the books, right? Printing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they should be paying for all of the marketing to get the book out there.
Yeah.
Right? So if you, as an indie author, now if we have any indie author listeners, speak up, because I'm more or less just making this up as I go along with my limited knowledge of marketing. But if you were going to pay out of pocket to market your own stuff, right? I mean, you're going to pay to boost social media posts, pay for sponsored ads. So is 75% that the publishing company takes, is that a lot based on what they're getting?
Now, I'm not sure, but
I don't know either.
With a digital copy, you're not paying for binding, you're not paying for printing, you're not paying for any of that. So the only thing you're doing is marketing. And I feel like if a library is reaching out asking about a title, it's already been identified as one that is going to be relatively successful. Mm-hmm. Or have some type of following behind it where they know that their risk level is less. I don't know. I don't work for a library system. I'm really curious to go into my local library and talk to somebody about this, actually, which I think I'm going to do because I'm just genuinely more curious about how this stuff in the background actually works. Because as somebody who really loves to read, and I want to understand how all my what's the best bang for my buck and their buck as an author that I can give while not going broke and buying every single copy of every book I love.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting because there has been some people trying to pass legislation to improve these deals. So different states have tried to ask for basically just doing better around digital content. So, for example, judges in New York and Maryland struck down legislation to make digital copies more available under reasonable terms, but publishers won by using the argument that copyright laws inked in the state from that publishing transaction. So they've also created the Protective the Protect the Creative Economy Coalition opposes state legislation of new laws trying to act against current status quo. So this coalition was put together to make sure no changes happen, that you're still getting all of this. And the reason that I think this is kind of crazy is because I don't know where the tipping point is going to be, but the Pew Research Centers, they did a poll, and people who read physical copies is on the decline, while individuals who are using audiobooks have doubled in the same amount of time. So it's just like, where's that tipping point going to be where the digital is really outweighing? And don't you think that there would need to be a discussion about like, okay, nobody's reading these physical copies, so, or does that just make it, is it going to be more expensive to get those e-copies?
Yeah, I blame TikTok first and foremost. Well, I mean, let's think, like, TikTok is just pushing, and it's not just TikTok, it's social media in general, influencers like you and I, that is encouraging people to just like mass consume these books, right? That are like, get your hands on as many books as you can. And that's why audiobooks have become so popular, is so that people can be like, I read 800 books this year. No, you didn't. You listened to them. I'll Die on This Hill. Those two things are different. Neither's good or bad, but they're different. And yeah, people are like consuming more. They're less conscious about how they're consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just about who read the most, who found the, like, it's not even quality anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
just quantity. And nobody is talking about how they enjoy reading, just how much they've read or listened to. This, like, it's pure insanity. I mean, you're right, there's got to be a tipping point of like, something's got to change.
Yeah.
But it's just so convenient, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
so convenient to listen to a book while you clean or walk or whatever. And it's so convenient that I can be sitting in an airport watching TikTok and be like, oh, I want to read that book. Get on Amazon, download it, hotspot to my Kindle or whatever. Boom, I'm now reading this book in 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? It's so convenient. It is also so bad for your eyes. You know, we did that e-reader comparison video.
Yeah.
And whether well, first off, reading on an app on your phone is the worst possible thing you can do for your eyes. The second worst thing is using an e-reader. And the absolute best thing that you can do is read a physical book in good lighting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think, it's just time. It's time to take a step back from digital everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get back to really enjoying perusing through a library, going in, making a trip out of it. Don't get your favorite beverage, drink that in the parking lot, wash your hands, go in empty-handed before you start touching all of these books. Make it an adventure, an event, like, if reading's your hobby, do all the steps and enjoy it. You know how much I miss going to a library? I didn't even think about this until we started talking about this topic.
Yeah.
I miss going to a library.
Yeah.
I don't miss the late fees and forgetting that I have to take the book back, but
Yes. So I'm curious because, like, some libraries do take donations. Can I donate my digital copy of a book to a library?
such an interesting question. I have no idea.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Along the lines, what happens to, can I leave my like iCloud account in my will to somebody?
That's what I literally have in the show notes is, can I donate digital copy to library, take them all when I die? Like, Just give them to the
Yeah.
library when I die. I don't know.
Somebody, anybody,
Let us
let us
know
know.
in the comments. Please let us know. And if you're still here at this point in the episode, put a book in the comments down below. I
A
also
book?
have, yeah, a book emoji.
Oh, I was like, a what? Yes, that's a great idea.
Yes. I found a really cool fact also that it's kind of a side fact. It is about Overdrive, so not too far off the topic here. But Overdrive, which is the parent company of Libby, started in 2003 in the Cleveland Public Library system 4 years before Kindle was released. So
Wow.
they are the OG.
That's very interesting.
I thought so too. So they know some stuff over there about how this world works. They've been doing it from day one.
Yeah. As a little bit of an aside, a little bit of a tangent, you know how I love my conspiracy theories.
Yes.
And since this whole entire episode has been about ebooks, digital copies, did you hear what PlayStation and Sony did?
No.
So PlayStation and Sony, their contract changed with Discovery, like the streaming, the channel, the streaming platform. And so they sent out at the end of 2023, I think it was November of 2023, they sent out a little head notification to everybody saying, "Hey, as of December 31st, 2023, you will no longer be able to access any Discovery content on your PlayStation device. Whether it was rented or purchased, you will lose access to all of it." So if you paid, what, $30 to buy a show or a movie, you were going to lose access to the movie that
Wow.
you quote unquote bought.
That's wild.
Yes. Now, it didn't actually end up happening. I don't know if it's due to publicity or backlash or what, but it didn't end up happening. However, it is a great reminder that you do not own anything in digital format.
Yeah.
So get those paper copies.
Yeah. If you love a book. I mean,
Yep.
you could go really deep with that about like things could go down. The world, the internet could crash, things could go down, solar flares, I don't know. All this weird shit that's been in the news, like, and you don't have access to whatever's not downloaded to your device. Like,
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh my god, I didn't even think about it. I would lose access to all my dark romances if there was a solar flare.
You would. Yes.
Oh man, it's the end of the world.
Truly, actually would be the end of the world.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point.
with all this being said, it's just a friendly reminder that we ourselves needed, that we wanted to share with the community about what it really costs to be a consumer of digital media in this bookish world that we live in, and how we need to all be more diligent about physically going into libraries, utilizing their other resources, maybe doing a contribution to your local library, whether that's through monetary or volunteering your time. I know when they put on events, they typically are looking for volunteers. So be sure to physically go into your local library and check something out. Because I know that's going to be something that I'll be doing. Be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram, because when I do go over there, I will bring you with me so you can see my public library. We also post some different type of stuff over there. I'm working on some cool videos about different bookstores I've gone to in different states and different places. For if you're out and about in the world and you want to check something out, maybe you are near that bookstore and you could pop in and check them out. And typically they're smaller indie bookstores. So thanks so much for tuning in for this episode. And until next time, keep reading.